Well, what is a function? A function deals with that you have an input, you put that into your equation, and then you're going to receive an output. So now instead of using x and y, we're going to still continue using those, but you're now going to see the function notation, which is f of x, which actually stands for your y. So it's what you put into the equation and then what you're going to get out. So what happens is that if we had a linear equation like y equals 3x, a linear equation is a function. And if we were to put our input in, which is always our input is going to stand for our x value. If we put in our x value of -2, we're going to get the output of -6. So what we put in, we're always going to get a direct output. So our x value is always going to be our independent variable, where our y value is always going to be dependent on what our x value is. The x value is independent because that's what we put in first, and then our outcome is dependent on what our input was. So we put in -2 into our equation, so y equals 3 times -2, which is going to give you a -6. You might also see it in that function notation where it says f of x, where it might be f of -2 equals 3x, and you'd still get the same output. So when we're talking about input and outputs, we're talking about domain and range. Domain is dealing with our input or x value, and a domain is a relation of a domain of a relation is all the set of inputs or x coordinates, and they're always what is independent. So the y values or the range is going to depend on what our inputs are. Now, our range of a relation is a set of all outputs or y coordinates. So it's going to be dependent on what our domain is. So domain is always going to be our x value and our inputs, where our range is always going to be our output and our y value. So for example, if we define the domain and range of the function represented by the graph, you notice that there's these 4 coordinate pairs on our graph. Now, it's the best bet is to write down all of your coordinate pairs. So this one we have -3, 2. We have -1, 0. We have 1, 2. And we have 3, 4. So to find our domain and range, we know that our domain is our inputs or x values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to underline all of my x values. So I have -3, -1, 1, and 3. So those are going to be all of my domains. So I'm going to write down my domains in numerical order is -3, -1, 1, and 3. So those are all my domain, or what my domain is. Now my range is going to be my y values or my outputs. So I'm going to underline my y values or my outputs, and I'm going to write down what my range is in numerical order. So my range, if you notice, you have 2, 0, 2, and 4. This should actually be -2. So this should be -2, 0, 2, and 4. So we're now going to have our domains are our x values, our ranges are our y values, and that would answer that question because we found our domain and we found our range.